Wow, I'm overwhelmed. This is a great turnout. It's really heartening to see so many people come out who clearly care a lot about Redwood City and this project. So first of all, thank you so much for joining us tonight to talk about the Farm Hill pilot project. My name is Jessica Manzi. I'm Redwood City's Senior Transportation Coordinator. And just to let you know, welcome to this meeting. And the purpose of our meeting tonight is to get feedback from all of you, experts who use Farm Hill and Jefferson on a daily basis, about how the project is working for you and how it might not be working for you, so that we can make the pilot as good a project as it can be. For those who aren't familiar with the background, it was originally proposed as a year-long pilot, and so this is really our first check-in with the community to get feedback on how we might want to change it to make it work better for folks. So first, before we get started, I want to introduce the city staff that are here. First, I'm going to start with Claudia Olaya, who's in the back, raise your hand. And Claudia is bilingual, she speaks Spanish. And for anyone that needs translation, she's here to do that for you. And I would give her the mic to ask that in Spanish if she runs up.
Buenas tardes, gracias por estar acá. Los invitamos si tienen alguna pregunta en español o quieren que yo les traduzca, por favor díganme y yo les ayudo.
So aside from Claudia, tonight we have Peter Delgado, who is in the back, Christian Hammock, Susan Wheeler back there, and Melissa Stevenson-Diaz, our new city manager, is in the house over there. So those are the city staff, I believe, that are here. And in addition to the city staff, we also have staff and volunteers from the Peninsula Conflict Resolution Center who are really here to help facilitate this meeting. And I'll hand it over to Debbie to introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Debbie Schechter with the Peninsula Conflict Resolution Center. And we're here not because there's a conflict. We're here because we partner with the city of Redwood City to help them engage communities in issues that affect them, like this one. So we work before there's a conflict, we work to prevent conflicts, we work in conflicts. We generally try to work to help communities and local governments work together better. So that's why we're here, to help with this meeting. So my role in this meeting is to be neutral. I don't have a stake in the issue, but I'm here to help the city manage the meeting and to make sure that we have as productive a conversation as possible and that you all have a chance to express your views tonight. The city staff today will serve as a resource to help answer your questions and to receive your input. I wanted to introduce the other PCRC folks who are here to help me, Saini, Deb, and Elaine. So they're here to help me and to help you in the meeting. So what we had planned to do, sorry, we had a board in front, so hopefully you all got to fill that out with some information about yourselves. But since there's so many people, I think I'll just ask, how many folks have attended previous meetings regarding the Farm Hill Road project? Okay, a good chunk of folks, but not nearly everybody. How many people have received or read information about the pilot on the city's website? Okay, it looks like a lot of you. And how many people are here to give their input tonight? Hopefully that's everyone. Great. Well, thank you, because you all care about your city and about your neighborhood and about your street, so that's what we're here to do today. Our purpose is to get your input on what's working and what isn't working with respect to the pilot so that the city can make adjustments. And as you know, this has been a multi-year effort. The city's received a lot of comments, and this meeting is just one more opportunity to give comments. I'm going to quickly walk through our agenda today. So Jessica will be giving a presentation to talk about the goals of the pilot, what has happened so far, and how it will be evaluated, along with some of the comments that have been received so far. hopefully you had a chance to view some of these boards when you walked in. The idea was that we would give you time to view the different stations, and then after that we'll have an opportunity to give input at the stations on different aspects of what's working and what isn't. And we'll talk more about that in a little bit. At the end, we'll try to briefly summarize some of the comments that we've received, and then Jessica will talk about next steps. I know that everybody's time is really valuable, and so our goal is to end the meeting at 8 o'clock. Obviously, there's a lot of folks here who all want to give input, and so we're going to try to do that as efficiently and effectively as possible. One of the things we do at PCRC to help things run smoothly and to make sure that everybody feels comfortable is to establish some group agreements for how we're going to run the meeting. So our group agreements for tonight are to speak one at a time, which is really important in such a large group. Speak and write respectfully. So speak respectfully, and when you write your comments, do that respectfully as well. Listen for understanding, so know that there are a lot of different perspectives in the room tonight, and listen to try to understand some of those different perspectives. Speak and write from your own experience, so that's what we want to hear from you. What has been your experience with the Farm Hill pilot? And then let the facilitator guide the process. So can people abide by those group agreements for tonight? Can I see some heads nodding? Yes? Okay, great. Thank you very much. That will help us a lot. And finally, if there are issues and questions that come up that are beyond the scope of the project, we're going to try to capture those in what we call a parking lot. We want to make sure that we hear your ideas and issues, even if they are not directly related to the Farm Hill Road pilot, and so we'll capture those and find a way that the city will get back to you on those as well. It's not a very big room and a lot of people, so hopefully you will do what you need to do to keep yourselves comfortable. There are restrooms in the back over there, and there are also restrooms here and here. There's some snacks in the back as well. And I know a lot of people are standing, and I really apologize for that. So if you need to sit down and you don't have a seat, we'll try to arrange that for you. Okay, so with that, I'd like to turn it back over to Jessica to do the presentation.
Thank you. And so it sounds like there's a lot of people that are quite familiar with this project, so I'll try and go a little bit lighter on why we started the project, so we can get to the conversation with you and getting your feedback as quickly as possible. Before I start, I neglected to introduce another really important member of the city family. Sergeant John Gunderson's standing in the back, representing the police department, so he'll be here and available to talk to you about any questions or concerns you have regarding enforcement. So with that, what I'll be talking about tonight is a quick description of the pilot project, the process that we followed so far, the goals and expected results from the project, some of the feedback that we've received to date. You probably noticed that there was quite a bit of police enforcement over the course of September, so we'll talk a little bit about what the police department did during that month. And we'll also talk about the monitoring goals that we have for this project to help evaluate whether it's doing what we expected, whether it's being successful or it's not. And then there'll be a chance for clarifying questions at the end. So most of you should be very familiar with this standard design of the street. Farm Hill used to be, and I'm using Farm Hill as a shorthand for both Farm Hill and Jefferson. It's pretty consistent for the whole segment. But Farm Hill used to be 2 lanes in each direction with parking. Now it's 1 lane in each direction with a 2-way center turn lane, bike lanes, and parking. The purpose of the project fundamentally was to increase safety, whether you're walking, riding your bike, driving in the corridor. It was really driven by this interest in increasing safety for everybody. The way that one way that we're measuring that and what we're expecting is to see fewer crashes. One of the reasons why we get fewer crashes with this design is that there's simply fewer potential ways for cars to hit each other with a 3-lane design over a 4-lane design. Also slower speeds. If you're going slower, you have more time to react to other cars that are coming. So you're more likely to be able to avoid a collision, or if there is a collision, it happens at a slower speed. This design also increases safety for people trying to cross the street. With a 4-lane design, if that first car stops because they see someone crossing the street, they're blocking the other car's view of the person crossing the street. So you set up this potential crash as a car goes by someone that's stopped for a person crossing the street. And it just reduces the amount of space where a person's crossing the street where they're exposed to traffic. It also increases predictability of cyclists. When you have a bike lane, it's very clear where bicyclists are expected to ride and where you can expect them. And the design also provides a buffer between moving traffic and parked cars. So I know that in the past there's been a lot of situations where people will park their vehicles halfway on the sidewalk because they're concerned about their car being sideswiped. And so this provides a real buffer so that people can feel comfortable parking their car on the street without fear of it getting hit. And it also provides space for people getting in and out of their cars. So this is just a diagram that illustrates how there's fewer potential conflict points. On the left, you have this 4-lane cross-section, and you can see how you have potential crashes. If someone stopped in the left lane to turn into their driveway, some cars will stop and go around that car. You have potential for people being rear-ended. And a lot of those crashes are simply eliminated by having 1 lane in each direction. And a really big important benefit of slowing speeds is the increase in survivability of crashes. So if a person is hit by a car going 20 miles an hour, they have a 90% chance of surviving that crash. If they're hit by someone going 30 miles an hour, that goes down to 60%. When someone's hit by a car going 40 miles an hour, their chance of dying is 80%. That's really what this is about. Slowing speed makes it safer for everybody. So this slide just shows our experience with other roadway reconfigurations in Redwood City. We've done them in a number of locations. Basically, our experience has been in all of these situations, the number of crashes has gone down. So this just highlights some of the streets: Jefferson, Industrial, Brewster, and Winslow. So it's been very effective on these other streets. And most probably have experience on these other streets. Alameda is another example. So just briefly, the community process. This is an area where we continue to strive to improve our ability to communicate with you. And I think as the project has gone along, that's gotten better and better. I think, as we can see tonight, we did a really good job at getting the word out. So I'm pleased to see that that's improving. But this basically started way back in 2012 because of concerns raised by residents living on Farm Hill or nearby about the safety of using the street. And so we started off with a discussion about, is there interest in trying to make the street safer? Redesigning the street to make it safer. And coming out of that, the answer was yes. Not to say that it was a unanimous yes, but really folks were ready to try something different. And so since then, we've been working in a lot of different venues with the community to refine the design to make it better as we went. I think most folks are familiar. The project started construction still during the summer, but then the real sort of Armageddon hit the day after Labor Day. And as a result, we also had an early presentation to the City Council about the project and how it was going, and came from that meeting a recommendation to hold this community meeting to, again, get more feedback. But we have been getting quite a bit of feedback all along the way. So these are some of the lessons learned. I've alluded to some of them already. Obviously, outreach. I know there's a lot of people in the room that felt like they weren't engaged by us early in the process and would have liked to have been. We understand that, and we are working to improve that with every subsequent meeting. We've added tools for outreach, whether it's Nextdoor or social media on Twitter and Facebook pages, or simply expanding the area that we advertise the project to. And then also the changeable message signs. Did anybody come here only because they saw the changeable message sign on the street? Great, that's helpful feedback. Communication, sort of as you saw with that timeline on the last slide, there's a lot of work in 2012 and then seemed like a pretty long break until 2015, and then also between the time that council approved the project, between that approval and the actual start of construction, we should have done a much better job about communicating where we were and what was coming up next. And that's going to continue to be an area that we work on. Also, timing, again, it came out at a really bad time. That first day was horrible. I drove the street. I'm sure many of you were there too. It's certainly not what we were expecting and not what we'd planned for. The good news is it's gotten much better since then. But obviously in the future, we'll work much harder to get the construction done well in the middle of summer rather than so close to the start of school and Labor Day, which is a traditionally really heavy traffic time. And finally, we brought the police department in to help folks learn how to use the reconfiguration. Probably Wednesday is when we started that after folks first releasing it on Tuesday. But we should have brought them in from the get-go, really to encourage, help everybody learn the new, how to use the new street as soon as possible. So those are some of the lessons. We continue to be learning from the experience. If you have more suggestions for us, there's lots of opportunities for you to write that feedback down. This, I'm not expecting everybody to read it, and I won't read it either, but I just want to say that there has been, we've received a lot of feedback, both in support of and against the project from a lot of different venues, from phone calls, emails, input to my RWC, emails to city council members. So we've been getting lots of feedback. And so this is just a sort of snapshot of what we've heard. But again, we're hoping to add to that tonight and get really detailed input from you. And that's actually a good opportunity to tell you how best to provide your feedback tonight. We're collecting all the feedback that you have. We're particularly interested in the ways that we can improve the pilot. The more specific you can be, the better it is for us. If you can say, it's really hard for me to turn left from Highland onto Jefferson at 8:15 during the week. That's something that's really concrete that we can say, okay, let's see what we can do, is particularly helpful for us. General traffic's really heavy. Good to hear that too, but that's a little bit harder for us to respond to in the design. So the more specific you can be, the better it is for modifying the design. So the enforcement results. There were 30 days of targeted enforcement, and they moved around different parts of the corridor, both on Farm Hill and Jefferson, as well as streets feeding into them. During those 30 days, they issued over 600 tickets. Roughly 2/3 of those were moving violations. And I think it shouldn't be any surprise to folks, but 63% of those were for speeding. So it continues to be a concern. Almost 30% were stop sign violations, people not coming to a full stop. And then 6% were red light violations, so people running red lights. And there were also another 200 violations. The most common of those was people using a cell phone while they were driving. And just to get a sense of where those offenders were coming from, unfortunately, most of them were coming from Redwood City. 38% from the zip code of 94062, 15% from 94061, and 6% from 94063. So we all can do better, apparently. So that's just a little overview about the enforcement. If you have specific questions, like I said, Sergeant Gunderson is available for those. So the monitoring and data collection, the reason this is a pilot project, it's put out there really to see how it functions in real world conditions. We have a lot of tools as traffic engineers to model a roadway redesign, but ultimately those are models and they don't give us, don't necessarily provide us with the exact performance of a project. So this time period is really a chance for us to change how the street looks and collect a lot of data to see if it's meeting our goals. So a big thing we're focusing on is overall traffic volumes. The goal of the project isn't to get people to take different streets, and certainly not the side streets. We really want people to stay on Jefferson and Farm Hill, but to do it slower, to make it safer. So we're looking at overall traffic volumes. The peak and off-peak travel times. The models suggested that we were expecting an increase of 60 to 90 seconds during the peak period. So we're collecting data on how long it's taking people to travel that corridor, both an average as well as what are the maximum travel times, because sometimes data can get averaged out and it's different than going through when it's really slow and what that sort of the pain of that longest trip is. Like I said, we're looking at traffic and how might divert it, if it's diverting into residential streets. We're looking at how much traffic is on Edgewood and Woodside. Are people that used to take Farm Hill going to those alternatives to get to 280? And we're also looking at whether there's timing changes for the signals to help improve the flow of traffic. And then also driving speeds, how many collisions there are, and generally driver behavior. So these are all things that we're looking at. The evaluation plan for the project was approved by the City Council. If you want to see all of the details about that, our website provides all of that information. And we will be providing all of that data to you as well through our website. So now it's a chance for you to ask any questions about the presentation, if there are clarifying questions. You couldn't fit in bike lanes without removing parking. Sorry, the question was, wasn't there room for bike lanes with the 4-lane configuration? And the roadway design changes obviously along the corridor, but the basic answer is no, without removing parking, you couldn't fit in bike lanes.
How many more accidents are there on Farm Hill than there are in Jefferson?
I would have to pull.
How many accidents are there with bikes on Farm Hill as well as Jefferson?
So is the question about bikes or just collisions?
About bikes and collisions. There's more bike traffic on Jefferson, I believe, than there is Farm Hill. So how many more accidents are there on Jefferson than there are on Farm Hill?
So I don't have I can pull that specific data for you. I don't have it right at the tip of my fingers right now.
The gentleman back there first,
Sorry.
and then you, and then you, number 3.
Of the traffic data, the over 600 violators and 69% of them being for speed, do you have the data that shows how many are coming down Farm Hill as opposed to going up? Speed-wise, because nothing is applied to curtail speeding down as well.
Okay, the question was, of the 69% of the people who were cited for speeding, how many of those were going down the hill and how many were going up the hill? We don't have that data with us right now, but the data that we're collecting on speeds is broken down by direction, so we will be reporting out on the speeds that the traffic is going in each direction.
So this gentleman, this woman. I'm sorry. Excuse me. A lot of people have questions, and so we're gonna go in order. So here. I couldn't see who was next. 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay. So you were.
I've lived here for quite a while, and I never, ever see a bike going up and down that hill. Research before they put those bike lanes in to count the bikes that go up and down that street.
We did.
You did?
We did. We have.
Came out to be what?
So we've collected, before the project started, we collected information on how many cars were using the streets, as well as the number of people walking and biking at different locations. So that's part of the evaluation that we have. And I readily admit that it's not an easy road to ride, but we also have to acknowledge that there are people that may not have alternatives to driving. Say, kids going to Woodside High School that live south of Farm Hill, there aren't alternative roads for them to take. And so Farm Hill is the street that they would take. But I admit it, I'm not someone that's going to be riding up that on a regular basis.
How many? The biggest question were how many bikes?
Yeah. So it depends on the intersection. Again, this is all data that we're going to be providing to you and as part of the evaluation. The point of this meeting is really to be getting feedback on the design and how it can be made better, or things that are working and not working. So the data will be available to everybody, and that's not something that we're trying to hide from you, but I don't want to divert from the focus of the meeting, which is to get your feedback on the design.
So, excuse me, I saw about more than 10 hands with questions. So we're going to try to answer about 10 clarifying questions, and then we're going to move to getting your input. You'll also have the opportunity to interact with city staff and ask more questions that way. But in a room of 200 people, we really would be here all night if we tried to answer everyone's questions. So you were number 3.
Actually, it was the same as the gentleman before me, but I do have another question. It's on Glennon. They painted a little island where it comes into Farm Hill, and it effectively cuts off anybody who wants to turn right.
So this is exactly the kind of input we want to get from you in the input part of the meeting. Okay. It wasn't a question, it was a comment about a specific area. Excuse me, there. Okay, all right, you can repeat the question.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Is it? Can you hear me?
Put it closer to you. You have to put it closer.
Okay. Okay. On Glennon, when it intersects with Farm Hill, there's a little island that has been painted on Glennon. And what it does is it effectively cuts off anyone who comes down Glennon and wants to turn right onto Farm Hill. And my question is, what is the reason for putting that there?
Okay, one of the concerns that we'd heard before the start of the project was about the speed of vehicles making that turn coming down off of Glennon onto Farm Hill. So the median was put in there as a way to narrow the roadway and slow down those turning vehicles.
So I'm going to ask whoever I gave number 4 to ask their question.
Hold on one sec. Let me bring the mic.
So if I give you a number, please remember it. Thanks.
Was there any study done on people on Farm Hill who live there to getting out of their driveways during commute times?
So we collected data on, we have been collecting data on how long it takes people to get onto Farm Hill from side streets, but not specifically from individual driveways. But that's the kind of feedback that we're hoping to hear from individuals tonight. Is it making it easier, or is it making harder? Some people have found strategies for getting in and out that work better. So it's an opportunity to share that feedback.
All right, who was number 5? Don't remember?
I don't remember anyone being given numbers, so.
I went up to 7. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I'll do better next time.
I did raise my hand before.
Okay.
Anyway, this is a clarifying question. You displayed a summary of accident reduction in a variety of different previous projects. And the one that seemed to be most dramatic was Jefferson. But aside from the pilot project, Jefferson is almost entirely still 2 lanes in each direction. So could you clarify what you meant by an improvement in Jefferson traffic flow that led to such a large reduction in accidents?
Great question. So it's the section of Jefferson downtown. You know, downtown it used to be 4 lanes, and now it's 1 lane in each direction with a center turn lane.
Excuse me. Number 6, or there were a couple over here and then one over here. Do you remember? And I'll do a better job of tracking next time.
Hi, I have a question. If Redwood City downtown expansion has been a factor in the planning of this project, obviously the number of the cars on the Farm Hill will be dramatically better with box buildings and 601 Marshall going up.
So we did take that into account. We have the data from the environmental impact report for the downtown precise plan, and we pulled those numbers, and they did fit within the capacity of the roadway. But again, this is an opportunity to see how that's working, and if it's not. But that was something that we did consider, and it is good to keep in mind that this is a change to the paint on the street. And although there's a cost associated with it, it can go back at some future time if that's what the decision is.
right, I'm going to give you numbers. I'm going to give you numbers if you raise your hand.
Wait,
so
I was
please try to
number
remember them.
7. I'm number 7.
Okay.
Can we do with number 7?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And then, yes.
So on the charts, you showed the percentage decrease in crashes, but it would also be nice to know the actual number of crashes. Are we talking about 1 a year or 100 a year? That would be information that would be useful.
Sure, and I'm sorry if it's not clear enough. But for Jefferson, the annual number of collisions, and this was based on a 5-year average before and after the project. So for Jefferson, it went from 25 crashes a year down to 14. Industrial went from 8 to 3. Brewster went from 11 to 8. And Winslow went from 10 to 2. And that's on an annual basis.
On Jefferson, is that the one lane, the one block? I mean, you really didn't do any configuration on Jefferson except right there by the movie theater.
That's the segment.
So,
and the crashes went down.
5 and 14 in one block.
It's 2 blocks.
2 blocks.
But yeah.
Okay, this gentleman is 1, 2. Okay, 1, 2.
Since we have
Okay,
our new,
we'll get there.
Since we have
Let's
our new
start here.
city manager here, just really quickly, how many people here are against what's happened to Farm Hill? If we can have a show of hands. And how many people are for it and thinks it's better?
So to me, I think that's a really good question, and that's really what we want to hear from people individually as much as possible. We want to get their very specific input on why they like it or why they don't. So thank you. Over here.
Here you go.
Yes, good evening. Question 1, how many people here actually live on Farm Hill or Jefferson, as opposed to those that live on the tributaries that come into Farm Hill and or Jefferson? Number 1, Jefferson, Farm Hill. Who lives on Jefferson, Farm Hill? Okay, tributaries that come into Farm Hill, Jefferson. Okay, the majority of us here are tributaries. Now, the study was done in the 300-yard radius initially when the study was done. Now, that hardly takes into account all the tributaries that come into Farm Hill Boulevard and or Jefferson. And you're talking about downtown. That's 1.5 miles, 2 miles plus from here, depending on where you're at on Jefferson or depending on where you're at on Farm Hill. So what does downtown have to do with this? Now, our big complaint.
So I'm not sure what you're asking with that.
Downtown has nothing to do with what's going on up here. I don't care what studies you did downtown. Downtown is downtown. This is up here. This is not downtown.
Great. Okay. Was there a question?
Number 1 question, of the planners that conceived this whole idea, how many of you actually live up in this area and have to deal with this problem of input, getting to Jefferson, getting to Farm Hill, day in and day out, as opposed to what it was before this whole fiasco started?
So I want to turn that around a little bit. The purpose of the project and why it started was a request of residents that live on Farm Hill and live in this neighborhood. We have professional staff, engineers, and planners that are here to help you design the project to be as good a project as it can be. I guess fundamentally, the point isn't whether we drive it every day. We drive it regularly to see how it's performing from a traffic engineering standpoint. But that's our role, is to help you design it. But we're looking for your feedback because you guys are the ones that are driving it 5 to 6 times a day.
Well,
how many people live on Farm Hill and how many people wanted this change?
Yeah. So we didn't survey asking that question.
So rather than try to gather a lot of statistics about who wanted it and who didn't and who lives where and who doesn't, what the city is really trying to do tonight is to get input from as many of you as possible, what you like, what you don't like. And so that's really what we'd like to do. We're going to take a few more questions, and then we'll move on to that input portion. So I'm going to give you numbers now. In the back, the white shirt is number 2. Across the aisle is number 3. Number 4 in the plaid, number 5 in the back waving, and number 6 in the white and black.
Who was number?
And number 7.
Okay.
And number 8.
I don't think I need this. I'd like to know, the people that live on Farm Hill, do they like this new configuration or don't they like it?
So we're not here to take a vote of who's here today. We're here to get people's input from as many people as possible, both pro and con. Number 2.
A point of clarification. Earlier, we stated there were no bike lanes on Farm Hill prior to this project. My recollection was about a year and a half prior to that, they shared the number 1 lane with bicycles. So there was bicycle directions in both east and westbound. Okay, that was point number 1. Point number 2 is, as far as I'm concerned, you've traded one issue for another. I can't tell you how many times I've driven up Farm Hill in the last month and a half, 2 months, where I've seen people overcome 3 or 4 cars at a time using the center lane. I would much rather have 2 lanes there than have the potential for a head-on collision at a higher rate of speed trying to clear 3 or 4 cars. You've created a monster.
Okay, that's great feedback. And just for folks who have similar concerns, there's a board over here that talks about the proper use of a two-way center turn lane for folks that might not be sure about when it is legal. And on the board for enforcement, there's an opportunity to write down that type of feedback, what bad behavior you're seeing, where are you seeing it, and when do you see it. The more specific information we can give to the police department is, the better their enforcement will be of that behavior.
One other point that I want to bring up, you're mentioning all these speeding tickets. I would want to know, a speeding ticket is not just a speeding ticket. How many are going 5 miles an hour over the speed limit? How are we going 10 miles an hour over the speed limit? How are we going in excess of 10 miles an hour over the speed limit? You brought up that chart earlier about 40 miles an hour, about 80% fatality rate, okay? What are we talking about? The speed limit's 35 on the road. If people are exceeding it 5 miles an hour over, there's always that buffer zone, it's always been known. You know, that's essentially important data. I want to know how fast people are speeding. It's skewed.
So we do, like I said, we have collected a great deal of data on how fast cars are going. Sergeant Gunderson can correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is that the average was 12 miles an hour over the speed limit for those people that were cited for speeding. I don't think we have it broken down by which segment they were on to know if it was 12 miles an hour over 30, so 42, or if it was 12 miles an hour over 35. But the average was 12 miles an hour over the speed limit.
So number 3, yeah.
I have 2 points that I'd like to ask. First, we've lived above Farm Hill. We look down on it for 34 years, and you stress the importance of safety. And that's the reason for doing this. I feel so unsafe on Farm Hill. I'm a nervous wreck. There is so much going on. You have to watch 2 bike lanes, 2 lanes, the cars that are parked, and the cars that are turning. It's way too distracting for a driver. It's just crazy. And I'm scared to be on Farm Hill. And I go down there maybe 6 times a day. So it's really detrimental as far as I'm concerned. Second, I was told by someone that the reason this whole thing was done was because the federal government would fund it if it was done this way. Is that true?
No. This project was funded out of traffic impact fee from development projects.
So I hear that you feel very unsafe on Farm Hill, and we want to be able to capture, as Jessica said earlier, your feedback as specific as possible about where and what. So we'll get to that in a little bit. Number 4.
Okay, I live right on Emerald Hill and Farm Hill. You turned it into a damn racetrack. When you go through that stop sign, there's 2 lanes. They go into 2 lanes, then they go to 1 lane. I could look over that fence and see how it used to be and how it is now. And another thing I want to know, you send us a letter saying that this was going to be an experiment. How much did the experiment cost? And if we don't like the experiment, how much does it cost us again? It's our money, our tax money. And you get paid by the tax money, so I'd like to know where my tax money's going.
Great. It's important, I think, to all of us to know that money's being well spent. The project, as I said,
who says that?
The project.
Was it you or him?
Okay, I'd like to respond to the question. The project is being funded by transportation impact fees from development projects. It's not coming out of general funds. The pilot was a little bit over $100,000 to put in, and if it gets removed, it's roughly another $100,000. There was an additional $60,000 that was spent on improving the sidewalk curb ramps, but we didn't, not really including that as part of the pilot project. That's a permanent benefit. And right, and so to your comments about Emerald Hill, the board over here shows a change to that design that I think addresses your concern. That's definitely feedback that we've been getting. Thank you.
So I guess I'm number 5. I just wanted to compliment you on what I think has been a major safety improvement on that roadway. I live on Farm Hill. I was in law enforcement. And I was a police officer for almost 30 years, and my last assignment was commanding our traffic division. And I get a little choked up because I covered so many terrible tragedies where speed was involved and inattentive driving was involved. And I've heard a lot of comments. I understand that this is inconvenient for many of you, and I really sympathize with you along those lines. But I can tell you that I go out and I walk my dogs at 7 to 8:30 in the morning and from 5 to 6:30 at night. And before the project, the 2 lanes that were coming down Farm Hill, because I walk up by Brandy Rock and in that area, the traffic was many times was traveling so fast that people had a real problem making that corner. They made it, but they had a problem doing so because they were busy texting, they're busy on their cell phones, or they were busy racing. And we had a substantial amount of racing activity as people were coming through that area. I know that there were many times when I really felt like somebody was going to come over that line and take out me and my dogs. As I say, I know that this is difficult, but the one thing I have noticed is that traffic seems to have slowed substantially coming down that 1 lane because people can't pass each other, regardless of what you're saying about the turn lane. I can only tell you I've never seen that happen, but I'm sure that you have. So I want to compliment the city on my safety feeling better, but also on just taking steps to try and make a safer environment so we don't end up with a really negative impact. I know that there are many things that can be done to make the project better, but I just want to tell you from one homeowner that lives up there and is on the street walking 6 times a day and driving, even getting in and out of my driveway, I feel much safer. I've had to make some adjustments, but I just think that I hear a lot of laughing and I hear a lot of comments and a lot of snickering. Like the city has come in to try and push this on you just because they don't have anything else to do. I don't think that that's the case. I think we owe the city the respect of at least understanding that they're trying to make something better, even if you don't agree with it. That's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Were we on number 5? 5, 6, and 7. See if you can remember.
Hi, I live on Pepper Tree Court, which is off of Lonesome Pine, off of Farm Hill. I am driving up and down the hill like everybody else. I have a turn lane that I have to use to get on Lonesome Pine to Pepper Tree Court. I am in that turn lane, there's a lot of traffic, and who's heading right at me? The sheriff's department with their lights on. They were gonna hit me head on. They had to go in the other lane around me. Who's learning how to use this? That's my question.
I'm sorry about that experience. I'm sure that was really scary, and I'll share it. I'm sure Sergeant Gunderson can have a conversation with our partners over at the county.
You know, on a positive note, I live on Farm Hill, and there's a bus stop there. And I have seen an increase of children walking to school and taking the buses because the cars are slower. And I think that's really important because our kids need to be out there walking and feeling safe.
Thank you. Are we on 6? Okay, right up here.
Hi, I had a point of clarification. I don't really understand the difference between the narrowing down of the lane from Alameda on up to the 280 versus the considerations of homeowners who live down on Jefferson where it still remains 2 lanes. I'm having a hard time understanding the logic of why you're doing it up here and you're not doing it down there. It seems to be that there should be some sort of consistency one way or the other with respect to how you treat the entire street from El Camino all the way up to the freeway.
So I've definitely heard concerns from residents on the lower part of Jefferson, and I would just say that we want that street to be safe too. It's not part of this pilot, but we hear you, and we're committed to making all of our streets as safe as they can be.
Hi, good evening. I live on Farm Hill myself, right at McGarvey. I'm leading into that last comment. Hi, good evening. I live on Farm Hill Boulevard, just north of McGarvey. So the noisiest, most dangerous possible place on the planet probably is right there with respect to this topic. Apropos the prior point about lower Jefferson, what's the speed limit on lower Jefferson right now? Anybody know? 30. What's it on Farm Hill? 35. No kidding. No kidding. Nobody does it. Nobody does within 10 of that, believe me, particularly at 8 o'clock in the morning. So that was one of my actually my only question to raising my hand a lot was, does anybody know that speed limit, and why isn't it 30 miles an hour? After all, it's the same kind of street, right? Yes, it goes from 4 to 2. That's number one in my mind. Been that way for a long time. With respect to the study, I've been looking for the last 2 months for postings of speed limits. Don't see any. Why doesn't it say 30 miles per hour every 50 yards if necessary? And a big, as you come up McGarvey, where my cars, 2 of them have been totaled in the last 4 months from people swerving around, hauling ass around McGarvey, turning on to Farm Hill, literally, took out 2 cars. Teenager, fiddling with the radio, doesn't matter really, but speeding, not paying attention. Why isn't there a big sign there? 1 lane, and education on the fly. Thank you.
Nana, I think that's great feedback to add to the charts and the boards at those locations. If you think there's a specific location that could really use another speed limit sign, please go ahead and add it. I do know, I've checked personally, that there are a number of speed limit signs along the corridor, but you find when you drive a street all the time, you tend to just zone out and not notice those anymore. But again, if there are specific locations where you think it's important, put it on our boards.
So we're going to move into the feedback portion of the meeting because that's really why we're here today, is to get your input. So I want to explain briefly the stations and what it is that we're asking you to do. And I understand there's a lot of frustration in the room. I hear it. And we've heard a lot of comments about places where things are not working and places where things are working. And we really want to be able to capture all of this in a graphic way in some cases. So the first station is over here on this side of the room. Obviously, you can see that there are display. Oh, I'm so sorry. I am so sorry. I didn't realize we hadn't taken everybody. So please, one last comment. Okay, two more. One, and I'm sorry. I didn't realize that we hadn't gotten to everybody. So we'll take 7 and then 8, and then we'll move into the feedback.
Who's 7?
7 is the lady in the blue jacket. Oh.
I understand that the focus on safety is multifold, and you mentioned that at the beginning that pedestrian survivability is tied to the speeding rate. I'm wondering if there's a data point specifically regarding pedestrian safety that's being evaluated in addition to just speeding. So in other words, I know you're measuring speeding rates, and then you can conclude that it's safer for pedestrians based on that, but are there any other data points that you're looking at regarding pedestrian safety, in particular crossing the road?
Yeah, one of the data points that we're collecting is driver yielding behavior. When someone's trying to cross the street, are cars stopping for them? So that's the biggest, most relevant to what you're talking about. We're also collecting data on how long pedestrians are waiting to cross the street. But it's really the yielding behavior is an important one. In general, we see higher compliance. More people tend to yield to people crossing the street when there's one lane of traffic than when there's two.
Okay, one last question.
Hi, I just want to say I've lived in this community my entire life. My mom lived on Hill. I grew up on Emerald Hill, and I Jefferson. One of the things that I've seen is a lot of road rage, and I have personally seen this, and my son has personally seen this, where cars have overtaken multiple cars in that center lane right by Stallstaff Park. And no one has talked about the safety of the park. And I understand somebody says that they feel that there are more children out there walking now because they feel it's safer. I have seen the opposite. I have seen this road rage where if my children were still young, I certainly wouldn't want them out there when I have witnessed this road rage and people literally doing 45, 50 miles an hour, passing multiple cars in front of Stallstaff Park. And that's a real problem.
I agree.
Thank you. I'm a resident of Edenbauer on the south side of Edenbauer, and actually, Jessica, you and I have exchanged a number of emails. With the new lane configuration, as I'm going down the hill from Edenbauer, that transfer is actually even more dangerous because it's only about a 20-yard sight line. I've actually been run off the road twice because people are coming down at such a high rate of speed. I'm turning on to Farm Hill Boulevard, and I'm not doing 35 miles an hour. I'm doing 5. I'm merging on to. So that's my first concern. It's very unsafe at Edenbauer to be merging down the hill. The other question that I have is there's a turn lane on the either uphill or downhill side, but there's no side streets to be turning. So why do we have that median in the middle when nobody should be turning in the middle of the road? Thank you.
Yeah, that's great feedback. In locations where there aren't opportunities to turn, we could just restripe that as a median. It's just for consistency of the design, but again, that is something that we could change.
I'm sorry, was that directed at me?
Yeah. That's the answer to the question.
What?
The turn lane is to turn to the opposite side of the street to get onto your driveway.
No, I think
If I can clarify, on the uphill side of Farm Hill Boulevard, there's no houses. There should be no parking. So it's the difference between Lonesome Pine and then Edenbauer and then Kenyatta College.
Right.
So my point is, why do you have a turn lane in the middle of a downhill section when no one's turning?
Thank you.
Of course.
Yeah, and so we wouldn't obviously turn the two-way turn lane into a median if there were locations of houses abutting that.
It's a question actually, sorry, about this chart and ones like it. Great chart doesn't mean anything without the denominator, how much traffic's going through each of these streets. And the question is, can we talk about this project in the same way? So reducing the absolute number of accidents doesn't mean very much to me on Farm Hill if we're not counting how many cars are actually going through that street. Unfortunately, this is one of many presentations of data that I've seen that's very either misleading or doesn't tell the complete story. And I'd ask that if this is a pilot, and it's called an improvement project, but it's a pilot where we should be objectively evaluating things, can we please look at them from a statistical point of view, talk to engineers, and present the facts in the right way that are actually meaningful and comparable so that we can come to an objective answer on this?
Thank you. That's certainly our intent, and we can turn these into rates for you.
Let's listen to this young person here. He's been very patient.
Hi, I'm 12, and so when I'm living up on the hill and I come down on the bike lanes, I used to not be able to do that because it was unsafe with all the cars and there wasn't bike lanes, but now that we have bike lanes, it's a lot easier and I'm allowed to go now. So my question is, how many people do you think are going on the bike lanes now? How much has it improved in the bike lanes?
Thanks for your, thanks. Can you still hear me? Yeah, okay. We just finished collecting all of that data about 2 weeks ago, and there's tons of data. So we haven't pulled out whether or not there's been a change in the number of people that are using the bike lanes, but we will have that information. So the counts are done with video cameras. So for pedestrians and bikes at intersections, it's done with a video camera, and then for speed and volume along a segment, it's done with rubber tubes that are strung across the road. So I know that there's a lot of questions that are out there. All of the staff are going to be in the audience, and we can answer more questions that are there, but I would like to transition to the station so that people can provide that detailed feedback that can help make this project better. Debbie started going over the different stations. I want to highlight, at this station here, you've got each segment of the roadway from 280 to Jefferson, so it's laid out geographically. Around the section with Emerald Hill, we have a couple of different scenarios that we're laying out. So if that's an area that's of particular interest to you, check out the options that we're considering as alternatives to what's out there now and provide feedback on that. Another location where we've developed a design alternative that we're looking for feedback on is how the lane drop is done going westbound from the Alameda. And that's shown right here. So if you're interested in that or have concerns about that, please come and look at that. Again, there's Post-it notes on all of the tables and pens. It's going to be crowded. I know there's lots of people. Please take those Post-it notes, write your comments as being as specific as you can, and just paste them onto the boards or give them to city staff or PCRC staff, and all of that information will be incorporated. I'm sorry, repeat that? Yes, we will do that. So the question was, can you comment on the website? The website right now has the email address for providing feedback, which is farmhillfeedback@redwoodcity.org. But all of this information will be posted on the website so that you can view it. So other stations, we have one enforcement here. Sergeant Gunderson will be up here. And again, it's what are the bad behaviors that you're seeing? Where is it? When is it? If you have information on that and want to provide feedback, there it is. Another one here is feedback by transportation mode. So the folks making comments about, I don't feel like it just doesn't feel safe to me when I'm driving. That's a great place to put it. Other changes that you think should be made, that you can put it right there. As a cyclist, again, feel safer because there's bike lanes. That's a great place to add that feedback. In the back, we have, again, the information about how to properly use the two-way center turn lane, and then other areas of education. We have a lot of tools available and some really creative folks at the city that could potentially do videos, or we can just do more materials to help educate people. Everyone, when they got their driver's license, should have learned how to use a two-way center turn lane. Some people, may be honestly, just bad drivers. And that's not necessarily going to change with this project. But there are also people out there that honestly don't understand how to use the two-way center turn lane. So that's an example of education and opportunity that we could work on with our community.
A couple more comments about how we want to receive your input. Again, as specific as you can possibly be is great. We're also going to have a couple of facilitators helping. So if you would like someone else a facilitator to record your idea, they can do that on these. And we have additional Post-its and pens here. So are there any questions about the process that we're going to use? 1, 2, 3. Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. These people are first, and then if you have a question about giving input, I'll take that.
My question is on the two-way turn lane. I'm driving on Farm Hill to Garbage Truck. I got to go around it.
Oh.
Is it illegal to use the two-way turn lane?
That's a great question for Sergeant Gunderson. He'll be right up here. Are there other questions about the process? Because I know lots of people have questions. I'll be here, Sergeant Gunderson will be here, we have city staff, so if you have questions about the project, we're here. But right now, do you have questions about how to provide feedback?
Yeah, so you want us all to get up and go to the section?
No, we'll explain that.
Have the process.
Right. This is, you're right. We didn't give you the whole process. We just told you the input we wanted and how you'll give it. Any more questions about the input we want and how you'll give it? And then we'll tell you about that. Yeah, in the green.
If I understood you correctly, if this gets too bogged down tonight, all of this information will be on the city website, and we will be able to provide input on the city website?
I have to figure out the mechanism for actually providing the feedback on the website. You may need to email the feedback to us, but we have some pretty creative folks, so we'll try and figure out a way to be able to do it with the website. But all of these boards can be available on the website. Yep.
So, is this a question about the process?
Yes.
Okay.
We have more police presence. I know that it's costly, but isn't the cost offset by the revenue?
Again, that's a good comment for Sergeant Gunderson and the enforcement chart, and we can capture it there. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to ask that everybody, so now that Jessica's described the stations, I'm going to ask folks to stay in your seats and write your comments on Post-its. If you don't have Post-its at your tables, there's Post-its and pens up here, and I believe there's more in the back. Susan, are there any Post-its in the back? Okay, so I would ask you to take a few minutes and write and think about your comments, think about the locations that you want to give comment on, the enforcement and other issues that you want to give comment on. So enforcement, education, and then there. And then in a few minutes, I'm going to ask a section of the room to come up and post their Post-its. And I'll give you probably about 10 minutes to do that, and then I'll move to the next section. And I apologize that it means that some of you are going to have to wait, and I really appreciate your patience. Yes, do you have a process question?
This process is input, so we are no longer giving verbal input, not questions or what we think about the project, but so we can't talk to you verbally so everybody can hear our input on what happens on our street or what we're seeing.
You can't, not so that everybody can hear, but you are more than welcome to give your verbal input directly to city staff. The idea is that because we have so many people here and we want to gather everybody's input, we want to make sure that we have a chance to hear from everybody.
Okay, so just again, a little bit of, well, you can evaluation and talk while I go. So just to let everybody know, if it wasn't clear before, this was approved as a one-year pilot project. The city council can decide to shorten that pilot if they so choose, but right now we're still on that year timeline, but we are going back to council quite soon with a check-in, both to provide a summary of the feedback that we've gotten here tonight, as well as potentially to propose changes to the design of the pilot for their consideration. Included in that will be the preliminary data that we've collected. A couple of folks have asked about that. We will be putting the raw data on our website as well. So I don't have a specific date for you, I'm sorry. And we don't have a specific date for the city council meeting, but I'd expect it to be early in 2016. And I neglected to acknowledge some newly elected city council members in the audience, if folks didn't see. I think Janet Borgens is still here. There she is. And thank you for being here, Janet. And Shelley Mazur is also here in the back. So we have two newly elected city council members in the House as well. So like I said, thank you so much for coming out and sharing your evening with us. We will be here to take more comments and questions if you have them, but otherwise feel free to head home if you're ready. Thank you.